wealthy billionaire mocked pregnant wife's baby mistress, left him when truth came out. Adrian Caldwell's world glimmered like polished gold, a testament to his unwavering ambition. The pages of Forbes lauded him as a visionary millionaire, the face of limitless potential. Yet behind the stately columns of his Back Bay mansion in Boston, chaos brewed. His wife, Marina, carried a child he dismissed as a complication, an inconvenience that threatened to derail his fast track to even greater power. One chilling autumn evening, he stood before a crackling fireplace, swirling his top-shelf whiskey, wholly unaware that his carefully curated existence was about to be shattered. Little did he know, the real test of character was lurking just around the corner. Adrian Caldwell was born into a world where dreams were never mere fantasies. They were blueprints waiting to be executed. His father, Winston Caldwell, presided over an expansive family conglomerate that had roots in construction, shipping, and early tech investments. Their name carried such weight around Boston that private clubs on Beacon Hill and invitations to black-tie galas were merely formalities, guaranteed from birth. Their estate in Back Bay was a sprawling testament to old money and new ambition, a Georgian-style home overlooking the Charles River, complete with manicured hedges and a hand-carved marble staircase in the foyer. From a young age, Adrian was groomed for success. Winston enrolled him in the best private schools, Groton, then Phillips Exeter, before setting him loose at Harvard Business School, where he studied entrepreneurship and finance. His education was not just academic. Winston frequently took Adrian along to high-stakes meetings, teaching him to read the subtle cues of business negotiations. By the time Adrian was 25, he had launched Caldwell Innovations, a venture capital firm that specialized in funding cutting-edge biotech startups. Magazines like Bloomberg Businessweek and Forbes praised his daring approach to investment, and many believed that if anyone could surpass Winston's empire, it would be Adrian. But for all the polish and prestige, a subtle arrogance crept into Adrian's demeanor. He reveled in controlling people's destinies with the stroke of a pen or a signature on a contract. Wealth and power became the substance that fueled him. Rarely did he pause to reflect on whether these pursuits were hollow or whether deeper human connections were slipping through his grasp. It was at a charity benefit hosted by the Boston Globe for local literacy programs that Adrian first encountered Marina Monroe, a bright, warm-hearted woman from a middle-class background in Worcester. She had graduated from a modest state university and dedicated herself to educational outreach in underserved communities, focusing on early childhood reading programs. Her humility and genuine kindness captivated Adrian. Unlike the usual crowd of socialites and heiresses who frequented his orbit, Marina seemed grounded in a sense of purpose beyond wealth. Their courtship was swift and dramatic. The Caldwell name dazzled Marina's parents, who felt that a union with Adrian would secure their daughter's future. For her part, Marina was moved by Adrian's initial thoughtfulness. He donated generously to her favorite literacy campaign, inviting her to speak at exclusive galas about her mission. Amid the swirl of glamorous dinners, champagne toasts, and philanthropic outings, they fell in love, or so Marina believed. Within a year, they were married in a grand ceremony at Trinity Church on Copley Square, officiated by a prestigious reverend who had blessed half the city's elite. But real life began to intrude on the fairy tale. Work overtook Adrian's every waking moment. Marina, meanwhile, yearned for a family, envisioning a child who would inherit both Adrian's keen mind and her compassionate heart. She believed that having children was part of the next chapter in their shared life, a natural progression that would bring them closer. Adrian, on the other hand, saw fatherhood as a possible disruption, something that could slow him down. After all, there were multinational deals to broker, expansions to plan, and his name to uphold. Looking back, one could trace the early fault lines of their marriage to that difference in perspective. Adrian believed he was doing Marina a favor by allowing her to live in luxury and follow her philanthropic passions. Marina believed they were building a partnership, something more profound than just a shared address in a posh neighborhood. The clash of these expectations brewed silently, waiting for one spark to ignite it into an inferno. By the time Marina discovered she was pregnant, Adrian's empire had grown larger than ever, and his patience for domesticity had worn thin. He was on the verge of acquiring an avant-garde biotech firm, poised to launch the next big cancer treatment. It was the kind of move that would vault Caldwell Innovations from regional player to global titan. The timing, from Adrian's perspective, could not have been worse. The day Marina confirmed her pregnancy, she was giddy with excitement. She had been feeling oddly nauseous for weeks, an unmistakable shift in her body's rhythms. At the urging of a friend, she picked up a home pregnancy test. When the little strip showed positive, her heart soared. She imagined the joy on Adrian's face, the new dimension it would bring to their marriage. Yet when she told him, his reaction wasn't the exuberant embrace she hoped for. She found him in his study, formerly Winston's office, lined with centuries-old tomes and portraits of stoic Caldwell ancestors. The glow of a banker's lamp illuminated the tension on his face as he pored over financial statements. "Adrian," she said softly, cradling her stomach as if the child within already sensed her vulnerability. "I have something to tell you." He looked up, a fleeting mix of curiosity and annoyance crossing his features. "What is it, Marina? I have a conference call with investors in Geneva soon." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I'm pregnant." For a second, confusion flickered in his eyes. Then, as the meaning of her words sank in, his expression hardened like stone. Setting aside the papers, he leaned back in his leather chair, lacing his fingers together. "Right now? You're sure?" The question came out mechanical, as if pregnancy were a suspect transaction requiring verification. Marina nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "Yes, I'm sure." A lengthy silence ensued. Outside, the mid-afternoon sun cast golden rays through the tall windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Inside, the hush grew oppressive. Eventually, Adrian exhaled sharply, pushing himself away from the desk. He stood and walked to the window, staring at the Charles River. "This wasn't part of the plan," he muttered, more to himself than to her. Marina tried to steady her voice. "It's our child, Adrian. We've talked about having a family." He turned abruptly. "We talked about it, yes, but not now. My entire focus is on the biotech acquisition. Do you know how precarious this moment is for the company? For me?" In that instant, Marina felt the chilling recognition that she and the baby she carried were obstacles in Adrian's meticulously charted path. Something inside her wilted. She had hoped to share a life-altering piece of joy, only to face an echoing hollowness in return. She wanted to press him, to remind him that fatherhood was a responsibility, that the creation of a new life should transcend mere plans. But his face spoke volumes. It was as though her announcement had triggered only calculations in his mind, spreadsheets of potential distractions, intangible liabilities. Feeling tears threaten to fall, she nodded and silently left the room. As she closed the door behind her, she heard Adrian's phone buzz with an incoming call. Within minutes, the muffled sound of his voice filtered through the door as he switched back to business mode. For him, the problem was already shelved, at least for the moment. Marina retreated to the bedroom, where she curled up on the king-sized bed. The Boston skyline stretched beyond the window, lights blinking on as dusk approached. It felt as though the city was moving forward, while her own future had become alarmingly uncertain. She cupped her belly, whispering small affirmations to the child she refused to see as a mistake or an inconvenience. In that moment, she vowed to love her baby fiercely, with or without Adrian's support. Adrian's cold response set the tone for the following months. Marina's pregnancy progressed, yet each milestone was tainted by his distance. Whether it was the first ultrasound or an appointment at Massachusetts General Hospital, where the doctor confirmed a strong fetal heartbeat, Adrian barely feigned interest. He would ask clinical questions: is everything normal? Or when is the due date? Always in the same detached tone. Their once grand home grew quieter, as though the plush rugs and antique furniture absorbed the tension. Marina found small joys in preparing the nursery, selecting soft pastel colors for the walls, browsing baby boutiques on Newbury Street for cribs and plush toys. She documented every flutter of movement in her belly in a journal, imagining she might one day share these notes with her child. Adrian, on the other hand, poured himself into work. He left early, often before Marina woke, and returned late, quietly letting himself into his study. When they did cross paths, their exchanges felt like negotiations rather than intimate conversations. She would try to open up, recounting how the baby's kicks were getting stronger, but Adrian would respond with a polite nod, muttering something about a conference call in Tokyo. Some nights, he wouldn't come home at all, opting to stay at a luxury suite near his office in downtown Crossing. Marina told herself it was just the demands of the looming acquisition, that once the biotech deal was finalized, he'd rediscover his warmth. Yet, in her heart, a fear took root. She began to suspect that his absence involved more than just business. Whispers among the household staff hinted he wasn't always alone during these nights in the city. And indeed, lurking behind Adrian's professional veneer was Colette Chambers, a marketing director for one of the biotech startups Caldwell Innovations had acquired. With sharp wit and an eye for design, she had instantly caught Adrian's attention during a pitch meeting. In Colette, Adrian found a reflection of his own relentless ambition. She was unconstrained by moral qualms. If anything, she admired his power and wanted to harness it for her own gain. Their mutual attraction was sealed in the friction of late-night strategy sessions that morphed into something far more intimate. As days turned to weeks, Marina sensed the distance growing into an unbridgeable gulf. But her pregnancy also moved forward, unstoppable, each day bringing her closer to motherhood. She focused on self-care, gentle yoga sessions, prenatal vitamins, reading parenting books. Her volunteer work at a local literacy program became her emotional lifeline. Working with expectant mothers in poorer neighborhoods reminded her that resilience was possible, even in harsh circumstances. Yet a deep ache persisted. She felt alone, unmoored in a home that was supposed to be a sanctuary. The Caldwell name opened doors to the city's most exclusive events, but she found no comfort in them now. Even her in-laws Winston Caldwell and his wife, Rosalind, expressed only lukewarm sympathy. Winston, ever the stoic magnate, believed Adrian's reaction stemmed from understandable stress, while Rosalind gave vague reassurances that children just happen sometimes. It wasn't until the baby shower that the full brunt of Adrian's disdain for the pregnancy was put on public display. Marina hadn't wanted a large baby shower, but Rosalind insisted. The Caldwell family has a reputation for elegance, her mother-in-law proclaimed. We must celebrate this child in style. Thus, the house was transformed into a floral paradise on a crisp Saturday afternoon. Delicate arrangements of white roses adorned every table, and the air was filled with the scent of vanilla and cinnamon from the catered desserts. Friends of the Caldwell family arrived, many of whom Marina had only met briefly at fundraisers or black-tie dinners. She felt awkward, standing in the formal living room with a belly now visibly carrying 8 months of new life. Some guests approached with polite smiles, offering baby gifts wrapped in expensive paper. Others threw curious glances, as though trying to gauge if Adrian was truly ready for fatherhood. Adrian himself arrived late, dressed in a custom suit that hinted he had come directly from a business meeting. Whispers circulated. Some speculated about the biotech deal or his rumored dalliances. Others simply watched the tension between him and Marina. She approached him, trying to maintain composure, and whispered, "I'm glad you could come." He gave a curt nod and drifted to the bar, fixing himself a scotch. Several guests, including a few of Adrian's business associates, huddled near him. Marina overheard snatches of conversation. They joked about diaper duty, late nights, how fatherhood would hamper his edge. Adrian smirked in response, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "It's just one of those things," he said loud enough for half the room to hear. "Marina wanted a baby. I guess we'll hire the best nanny money can buy." Laughter rippled among them, though a few people winced. One of his associates slapped his back, quipping, "Just make sure it doesn't ruin your productivity, Caldwell." More laughter followed. Marina stood at the other side of the room, feeling each word like a slap. She had invited a few friends from her literacy program. Some of them looked on in dismay, having heard Adrian's dismissive comments about the very child they were here to honor. The mood felt brittle, like a porcelain vase teetering on an edge. Steeling herself, Marina tried to salvage the event. She greeted each attendee, thanked them graciously for their presents and gifts, and led them through a series of baby shower games. But the radiant joy she had once envisioned for this day was absent. Instead, she found herself blinking back tears at every turn, hyper-aware of Adrian's sarcastic laughter echoing from behind. Eventually, as the guests began drifting home, Marina's best friend from the literacy center, Mia, came up to her. Mia placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You don't deserve this," she said in a low voice, glancing pointedly at Adrian, who was now engrossed in conversation with a tall, raven-haired woman wearing a form-fitting designer dress. Marina recognized her as Colette Chambers, the rumored mistress. Her heart twisted into a painful knot. Summoning her last remnants of dignity, Marina nodded. "I'll be all right," she managed. But inside, she felt a storm raging. When the final guest left, the floral arrangement seemed almost mocking symbols of a celebration turned sour. Adrian drained the last of his scotch and walked upstairs without a word. Marina sank into a chair, the baby shower gifts piled around her, unopened. Outside, the sun dipped below the Charles River, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. She closed her eyes, silently promising her unborn child that they would be loved, no matter how cold Adrian remained. After the baby shower, Marina could no longer ignore the rumors about Adrian and Colette Chambers. She had spotted them together at the event, exchanging glances that were anything but professional. Late-night texts and vague excuses about urgent business dinners only reinforced her suspicions. Yet, every time she tried to bring it up with Adrian, he deflected or turned hostile, insisting she was being paranoid. Colette, meanwhile, was a frequent topic of office gossip at Caldwell Innovations. She had made a meteoric rise in the marketing department, thanks in no small part to Adrian's patronage. Employees whispered about how she seemed to have Adrian's ear in all strategic decisions, how they often left for client lunches that stretched into late afternoons. But nobody dared to confront them. Everyone knew how the Caldwell empire operated, and no one wanted to risk falling out of favor. One evening, Marina worked up the courage to confront Adrian directly. He had come home after midnight, smelling faintly of Colette's signature perfume. Determined, Marina marched into his study, ignoring the thrum of her heart. "Are you having an affair with Colette Chambers?" she asked, voice trembling but resolute. He looked up, eyes flickering with annoyance. "You want to do this now, Marina? It's been a long day." "I need the truth, Adrian," she demanded. "For the sake of our child, for my sanity, I can't go on pretending nothing's wrong." He inhaled sharply, dragging a hand through his hair. For a moment, his face softened, and he seemed almost tired of lying, tired of juggling secrets. But then, the arrogance returned. "What do you want me to say? That I found solace in someone else's company because you're so consumed by this pregnancy?" Marina's eyes flashed with hurt. "Consumed by our child? How could you even phrase it that way?" He stood abruptly, pacing the room. "What am I supposed to do, Marina? Pretend this was my plan? I'm on the cusp of the biggest business deal of my life. Colette understands that. She doesn't weigh me down with demands about setting up nurseries or reading parenting books." Disbelief coursed through Marina, followed swiftly by anger. "You're blaming me for loving a child we created together? Adrian, do you even care about what happens when she's born?" "She," Adrian repeated, as if hearing the baby's gender for the first time. "So it's a girl. Yes, a daughter," Marina said, voice thick with emotion, "and she deserves better than a father who sees her as a nuisance." Adrian turned his back, pressing his palms against his mahogany desk. The silence felt suffocating, punctured only by the faint ticking of an antique grandfather clock. Finally, he spun around. "I never asked for any of this," he said, eyes steely. "You and your righteous maternal instincts forced my hand." Marina stared at him, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. "It's one thing to feel unprepared, but to mock our child, and to use your mistress as a crutch for dealing with reality. I don't even recognize you anymore." He said nothing, merely returned to his seat and picked up a pen, feigning interest in paperwork. With a shaky breath, Marina left the study. As she climbed the stairs, belly heavy with the life they had created, she realized she was more alone than ever. The sense of betrayal cut deeper than any sorrow she had known. Little did she realize that the next momentous event would arrive sooner than they could fathom. Despite the turmoil, the third trimester of Marina's pregnancy approached its end. She had gone to bed one evening, feeling cramps more intense than usual. By 3 in the morning, the pain was unbearable. She fumbled in the dark, doubling over. Her water had broken, weeks ahead of schedule. Panic surged through her. She tried calling Adrian's cell, but it went to voicemail. Gathering every ounce of courage, she managed to dress, grab her hospital bag, and make her way downstairs. In the driveway, she realized Adrian's car was missing. He was likely with Colette. Heart pounding, she climbed into her own SUV and drove herself to Massachusetts General Hospital, each contraction shooting agony through her body. By the time she stumbled into the emergency room, nurses rushed to her side. "We need to get you into labor and delivery," one said urgently. Marina felt tears burning her eyes, not just from pain, but from the crushing sense of being alone at this critical moment. She handed over her insurance card, bearing the Caldwell name, and was promptly wheeled to a birthing suite. The neon lights of the hospital corridor streaked by in a blur of white and beige. As medical staff administered the fourth fluids and hooked her up to monitors, Marina gripped the bed rail, sweat beading on her forehead. "My husband," she stammered, trying to speak through the contractions. "Please, keep calling him." They did, but every attempt went unanswered. The obstetrician soon determined that the baby's heart rate was irregular. An emergency C-section became the only viable option to save both Marina and the premature child. Wheeled into surgery, dizzy from both fear and medication, Marina found herself under a bright surgical light. Within minutes, her world turned into a flurry of activity, surgeons in masks, scalpels, and the persistent beep of monitors. She tried to stay conscious, focusing on the knowledge that she would soon meet her daughter. Even if Adrian wasn't there, she had to be strong for both of them. At exactly 5:47 a.m., a fragile cry pierced the tense atmosphere. Little Liliana Caldwell entered the world, weighing just under 5 pounds. Marina's chest swelled with relief and awe. She craned her neck to see the tiny, wrinkled face, but a nurse swiftly took the baby aside for immediate neonatal care. At that moment, Marina's eyes fluttered closed from sheer exhaustion, a singular thought lingering in her mind. Please, let her be all right. Meanwhile, across town in a penthouse suite, Adrian was jolted awake by the insistent buzzing of his phone. He groggily checked it to find a slew of missed calls from the hospital. Dread washed over him. He slid out of bed, ignoring Colette's sleepy murmurs, and quickly got dressed. His heart hammered as he navigated the silent, early morning streets. Guilt clawed at his insides. He should have been there. He didn't know if either Marina or the baby was safe. When he finally arrived at Massachusetts General Hospital, he was directed to the maternity ward, where he discovered that Marina had been taken to a recovery room. Doctors informed him that Liliana was in the neonatal intensive care unit due to her low birth weight and breathing difficulties. The news knocked the wind out of him. Gathering his courage, Adrian stepped into the NICU, a place buzzing with hushed activity. Incubators lined the walls, each one holding a fragile life. The harsh fluorescent lights cast a stark glow on Liliana's tiny form. She lay amidst a web of tubes and wires, her minuscule chest quivering with each breath. Adrian pressed a trembling hand against the glass. In that instant, his heart lurched in a way it never had before. He thought about all the deals, all the nights spent with Colette, all the times he had dismissed this child. None of it mattered in the face of that frail little being struggling to live. Minutes later, he found Marina in a private recovery suite, pale and exhausted but conscious. She looked at him with an expression he couldn't decipher, a mixture of relief, sorrow, and resentment. Tears welled in her eyes, though she spoke calmly. "She's here, Liliana," she said, voice strained. "She's early, but she's fighting." Adrian stood at the foot of the hospital bed, shame burning through him. Words failed. He finally choked out, "I'm glad you're safe." But the sentiment felt feeble, hollow compared to the weight of his guilt. They didn't speak long. Marina, drained from surgery, drifted into a fitful sleep, leaving Adrian alone in the sterile hush of the hospital room. He stared at her, memories of every hurtful word echoing in his mind. For the first time in his life, the magnitude of what he'd done, what he might have lost, began to sink in. Over the next week, Liliana remained in the NICU. Marina spent her days in a wheelchair by the incubator, gently touching the small opening where she could place a finger against Liliana's palm. She sang lullabies under her breath, tears often slipping down her cheeks. The nurses offered encouragement, noting small improvements in Liliana's oxygen levels. Progress was incremental and uncertain, but each day brought a glimmer of hope. Adrian visited daily, though at first he lingered on the periphery, unsure how to engage. He watched Marina stroke their daughter's tiny fingers, listened to the monitor's beep, and felt an unfamiliar tightness in his chest. Guilt mixed with protective instinct, swirling into a confusing maelstrom of emotions. Meanwhile, Colette found herself increasingly sidelined. Adrian cancelled their usual dinners and strategy sessions, citing family obligations. She tried to call and text, but his responses were terse. At first, she assumed it was temporary, that once Liliana stabilized, Adrian would revert to his old ways. But something fundamental had shifted. Adrian began delegating more of his tasks, spending longer hours at the hospital. When Colette cornered him in the Caldwell Innovations office one afternoon, he cut her off. "This isn't the time," he snapped, gathering files from his desk. "My daughter's in the NICU, and that's my priority." Her eyes flared in anger. "We had plans, Adrian. Don't let a newborn derail everything we've worked for." He straightened. "That's not your concern." With that, he left, leaving Colette seething. Back at the hospital, The staff recognized Adrian's name from the Boston Globe and Forbes. Some were openly starstruck, others offered polite but pointed remarks about the responsibilities of fatherhood. One nurse, whose dedication to neonatal care was evident in her gentle manner, approached Adrian after she noticed him hesitate at Liliana's incubator. "She can feel your presence," the nurse said kindly. "Would you like to touch her hand?" Adrian paused, glancing at the array of tubes. "Is it safe?" His voice was uncharacteristically small. She nodded with a reassuring smile. "Yes, just be gentle." Carefully, Adrian reached into the incubator, resting his fingertip against Liliana's impossibly tiny palm. She grasped it with surprising strength, her eyes fluttering behind translucent lids. The moment sent a jolt through Adrian's entire being, as though an invisible barrier around his heart cracked. He felt tears prickle at the corners of his eyes, tears he had never shed, not even when his father had nearly disowned him for a bad business decision years ago. When he looked up, he saw Marina watching him, their gazes locked for a moment, steeped in unresolved pain and tenuous hope. She gave him a small nod, perhaps acknowledging that this was a start, a shaky, uncertain start, but a start nonetheless. With Liliana's condition slowly stabilizing, Marina was discharged from the hospital, though the baby would remain in the NICU until she gained enough weight. The Caldwell residents felt hollow to her without Liliana's presence. She set up a small corner in the nursery to pump breast milk, determined to provide for her child in any way she could. Adrian tried to bridge the emotional gap at home. He offered to drive her to the hospital each morning, to accompany her during late-night visits when the NICU was quieter. One evening, they returned from the hospital and found themselves in the living room, a place that had once hosted lavish parties. Now, it echoed with silence. Marina perched on a sofa, exhausted. Adrian sat down beside her, leaving a careful gap. The hush between them was heavy. At last, Marina spoke. "Where do we stand, Adrian? What happens after Liliana is out of the hospital?" He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know. I want to do right by her." Her voice cracked. "Do you want to do right by me?" For a moment, he looked genuinely wounded. "I'm trying, Marina." Tears glistened in her eyes. "You humiliated me at the baby shower, mocked our child, slept with another woman. Do you realize the damage you've done?" A simple apology can't fix everything. Guilt shadowed his face. "I never meant to hurt you. I was weak, selfish." She let the words hang. "Adrian, don't you see that the wealth and power you cling to are meaningless if you lose your family?" He stared at the floor. "I know I've been selfish. I was terrified of losing control, of letting anything get in the way of my ambitions. But seeing Liliana in that incubator, it changed me." Marina studied him, cautious but hopeful. "I want to believe that. But it's going to take more than just words." In that moment, Adrian felt a clarity he had never experienced. He realized that for all his supposed brilliance and success, he had been woefully ignorant about what truly mattered. "I'll prove it," he said softly, "however long it takes." A faint resolve flickered in Marina's eyes. "For Liliana's sake, I hope you mean that." The next day, while Adrian was in his office, Colette barged in unannounced. Furious, she accused him of leading her on. She sneered at his newfound paternal instincts. "You're going to throw away everything for a baby you didn't even want?" she spat. Adrian's jaw tightened. "That child is fighting for her life in the NICU, and she's my daughter. You wouldn't understand." Colette let out a bitter laugh. "No, because I'm not foolish enough to let biology derail my career." He turned away, disgust evident on his face. "This conversation is over, Colette. Do what you need to do, but stay out of my personal affairs." She stormed out, leaving Adrian with a hollowness in his chest. For all that Colette represented the freedom, the ambition, the unrepentant lust for success, he now saw how empty it was compared to the love he glimpsed in Liliana's tiny fingers. Liliana's health improved steadily. The nurses taught Marina and Adrian how to feed her carefully, how to monitor her vitals. Each day, the weight on Adrian's chest lifted a fraction as his daughter grew stronger, her cheeks filling out, her cries gaining volume. The day the doctors finally cleared Liliana to go home was bright and cool. Marina insisted on picking out a soft pink blanket for her daughter's first ride in the car seat. When they arrived at the Caldwell mansion, staff lined up to welcome the newborn. Though some seemed genuinely excited, others merely offered stiff pleasantries, aware of the tension that had enveloped the household. Adrian carried Liliana inside, carefully cradling her head as Marina followed. An uneasy sense of optimism filled the air. That night, after feeding Liliana, the couple gazed at their sleeping daughter in her crib. It was the first time in weeks that they felt something akin to harmony. Adrian gently reached for Marina's hand. She allowed it, though her body remained rigid. "I've asked Colette to leave the company," he confessed, keeping his voice low so as not to disturb Liliana. "I can't erase what happened, but I'm done living that way." Marina's eyes widened. She studied his face for signs of manipulation. Instead, she found sincerity etched in his features. "Does that mean she's gone for good?" He nodded. "I offered her a severance package. I need to focus on us, on Liliana." Emotion constricted Marina's throat. "Adrian, I'm still hurt. But if you truly want to change, if you can truly be there for Liliana, I won't shut you out." They stood there in mutual understanding, neither of them fully healed, but willing to attempt a new beginning. Outside, the city lights sparkled along the Charles River, a silent witness to their fragile truce. The weeks that followed were a crucible of sleepless nights and emotional shifts as they adjusted to newborn life. Liliana's cries echoed through the mansion at odd hours, forcing both parents to adapt. Marina often woke at 3 a.m. to feed Liliana, carefully holding her tiny form in a rocking chair near the window. Sometimes Adrian would rouse himself from bed to join them, albeit awkwardly. He learned how to burp the baby, how to change diapers, even how to handle the meltdown that ensued when Liliana had colic. For Adrian, each small act of care for Liliana was both humbling and transformative. The old adrenaline rush he got from closing deals was replaced by an urgent desire to see his daughter thrive. In the afternoons, he carved out time to be at home, no longer working late into the night or staying at penthouse suites. He hadn't yet mustered the courage to fully atone for his betrayal, but his presence was a tangible step. Marina noticed these changes, but she remained guarded. She occasionally teased out conversation about how he felt regarding fatherhood. "Does it scare you?" she asked one evening as they watched Liliana sleep in her bassinet. "It does," Adrian admitted. "I feel vulnerable, like I have to be responsible for someone other than myself." Marina nodded. "Welcome to parenthood." She gave him a small smile, which he returned, sensing the first real thaw in her demeanor. On a clear morning about a month later, Winston and Rosalind Caldwell paid a visit. They had traveled extensively during Liliana's birth, partly to avoid the uncomfortable domestic drama. Winston, standing tall in a tailored suit, looked at his granddaughter with an inscrutable expression. Rosalind cooed at Liliana, exclaiming over her tiny features. Winston pulled Adrian aside. "Your mother is relieved to see the baby healthy," he said, clearing his throat. "As am I." Adrian hesitated. Reading the subtext, Winston was offering a paternal olive branch. "Thank you," he replied. Winston's voice grew softer. "I know we've emphasized the importance of the business your whole life, but family. It's not something you can always schedule or control, Adrian." Adrian studied his father's lined face, recalling how Winston had once threatened to disown him over a failed venture in his early 20s. Yet here he stood, acknowledging the importance of Liliana's life. "I'm beginning to understand that," Adrian said. Behind them, Marina offered Rosalind a seat, valiantly trying to bridge the gap between the baby's maternal grandparents, who were unable to travel from Worcester that weekend, and the Caldwell clan. She caught Adrian's eye from across the room, and for a fleeting instant they shared a look of mutual relief. Trust, once shattered, demands consistent effort to rebuild. Marina suggested they attend couples counseling, a notion that would have horrified Adrian before Liliana's birth. To her surprise, he agreed. They found a discreet therapist in the Beacon Hill neighborhood, someone versed in guiding high-profile clients through marital rifts. At first, their sessions were tense. Adrian balked at discussing his feelings in front of a stranger, while Marina struggled not to let anger overcome her every word. But slowly, the therapist helped them dissect the underlying issues: Adrian's fear of losing control, Marina's sense of abandonment, the role each played in enabling destructive patterns. Simultaneously, Adrian surprised Marina by supporting her philanthropic work. He personally donated more funds to the Literacy Center, where she volunteered, even arranging for a donation drive that included baby supplies for underprivileged mothers. Initially, Marina was skeptical of the gesture, suspecting it was a mere PR move. But when Adrian attended the center's open house and spent time talking to families, she glimpsed sincerity. Still, Colette's shadow lingered. Rumors circulated that she was threatening legal action for wrongful termination. Marina braced herself for a public scandal, but none materialized. Adrian's lawyers likely smoothed it over with a hefty settlement. When she inquired about it, Adrian was forthright. "I paid her to leave quietly," he said without shame. "It's the least I could do for the trouble I caused." In counseling sessions, they addressed the affair directly. Marina struggled to understand how Adrian had so easily sought comfort in another woman. Adrian admitted he had never truly faced emotional vulnerability before. He had been raised to see relationships as transactions or alliances. Colette was simple: no expectations, no moral demands. "It was cowardly," he said. "I see that now." As they left the therapist's office one rainy afternoon, pushing Liliana's stroller over the uneven cobblestone, Marina suddenly felt a rush of empathy for Adrian. For all his faults, he was the product of an upbringing that equated success with self-reliance. The notion of fatherhood and marital intimacy was as alien to him as humility had once been. She gently squeezed his hand, and though the gesture was small, it signaled a step forward. Liliana turned 6 months old in what felt like a blink. The house, once cold and silent, now resounded with the warmth of a young family. Marina discovered an unexpected joy in recording Liliana's milestones, her first giggle, her first time rolling over. Adrian found himself checking his phone less and less during these moments, increasingly captivated by each new expression on his daughter's face. Every evening, they read to Liliana soft picture books that Marina had collected from her literacy center. Adrian's initially awkward delivery soon gave way to genuine animation. He learned to do silly voices that made Liliana shriek with laughter. That sound, that unrestrained glee, meant more to him than any round of investor applause he had ever experienced. Marina, in turn, found her faith in Adrian growing. Gone was the man who sneered at baby showers and derided fatherhood as a distraction. In his place stood someone who texted her during the day, asking for updates on Liliana's feeding schedule or offering to swing by the store to pick up diapers. It was a far cry from the cold, arrogant businessman she once saw, yet she knew better than to assume that all wounds were healed. Their therapy sessions continued, albeit less frequently, and they were no longer a slog of accusations. They delved into deeper topics: how to handle conflicts, how to ensure each felt valued, how to manage the power imbalances in their marriage. Adrian struggled with guilt, while Marina wrestled with lingering distrust. Still, both recognized that they were building a sturdier foundation. One sunny Saturday, while strolling with Liliana in Boston Common, Marina and Adrian ran into a figure from their past. Mia, Marina's best friend who had witnessed the disastrous baby shower. Mia was reading on a bench near the frog pond, and when she spotted Marina, she jumped to her feet. "Oh my gosh, is that Liliana?" Mia exclaimed, walking over. She beamed at the baby, who blinked curiously from her stroller. "Yes, she's getting so big," Marina said, lifting her daughter out for a hug. Adrian offered a polite nod, standing somewhat aside. Mia studied Adrian warily. She recalled the scorn he had shown at the shower, yet something about his stance suggested a shift in demeanor, less haughty, more grounded. She glanced at Marina, who gave her a reassuring smile. "Would you like to join us for a walk?" Marina asked, sensing Mia's hesitation. Mia agreed, and the trio strolled under the leafy canopy, occasionally pausing so Liliana could watch the ducks paddling in the pond. Conversation started out tentative, mostly focusing on Liliana's progress and the weather. But eventually, Mia turned to Adrian. "You look different," she said gently, "an olive branch of sorts. Happier, maybe." Adrian gave a small chuckle, glancing at Liliana. "She has that effect." He didn't elaborate on the months of remorse and repair, but Mia caught the sincerity in his voice. As they parted ways, Mia turned to Marina. "The first proud of you, both of you," she said quietly. "Just remember, true forgiveness isn't a single moment. It's a choice you make every day." Marina nodded, pulling Mia into a brief hug. She couldn't articulate how good it felt to see her friend's acceptance. Despite Adrian's attempts to salvage his reputation, the corporate world buzzed with gossip about Colette's departure. A few online tabloids hinted at impropriety. Yet, as is often the case in high society, the story soon lost its novelty. Another scandal replaced it in the headlines, and Colette Chambers faded into obscurity. She did, however, resurface briefly in an unexpected encounter. One afternoon, Marina decided to visit a boutique on Newbury Street to buy a gift for a friend's baby shower. She left Liliana at home with Adrian, who insisted on practicing some father-daughter bonding time. While browsing plush toys and pastel onesies, Marina froze upon spotting Colette across the shop. The other woman was flipping through a rack of designer baby clothes. Ironically enough, Marina's heart hammered. She considered leaving before Colette noticed her, but fate intervened. Colette turned around, locking eyes with Marina. For a moment, tension bristled in the air. But to Marina's astonishment, Colette only gave a tight, bitter smile. "Marina," Colette greeted, voice low. "I didn't expect to see you here." Marina swallowed, mustering calm. Likewise, they stood awkwardly among the pastel decor, a swirl of emotions churning. Colette's once confident posture seemed deflated. She cast a glance at a soft yellow onesie in her hand. "A friend is expecting. I needed a gift." "I see," Marina said softly. She remembered the humiliation of the baby shower. The sting of betrayal still lingered. Yet looking at Colette's subdued demeanor, she felt no triumph, only a weary sense of closure. "I hope you're doing well." Colette gave a short laugh devoid of humor. "I'm fine. Listen, I'm not going to apologize. Adrian and well, that's done. But you don't need me to remind you that you both had issues long before I entered the picture." Marina bristled but didn't deny it. "Maybe so. Doesn't excuse what you did." For a split second, regret flickered in Colette's eyes. "I suppose not, but life moves on." She placed the onesie back on the rack and exited without another glance. Marina exhaled, her shoulders slumping. The encounter was a strange coda to a painful chapter, yet something about it felt final. As she left the boutique, Gift in hand, she felt a surprising weight lift from her chest. She's truly gone. Liliana's first birthday arrived with a swirl of pink balloons, homemade cupcakes, and a cozy gathering of close friends, nothing like the ostentatious baby shower. Marina insisted on keeping it small, inviting only those who had supported them through the turbulence. Mia was there, along with a few families from the literacy center. Winston and Rosalind arrived, bearing an elaborate toy train set that was clearly too advanced for a 1-year-old, but well-intentioned nonetheless. In the spirit of reconciliation, Marina's parents made the trip from Worcester, delighted to finally celebrate their grandchild in a calmer setting. The star of the show, Liliana, toddled uncertainly around the living room, marveling at the colorful decorations. She had grown into a rosy-cheeked toddler, her hair forming soft curls at the nape of her neck. Adrian played the role of an attentive father, crouching beside Liliana as she attempted to smash her birthday cupcake. He laughed as the frosting ended up on his suit. Everyone snapped photos, once unimaginable scenes that now felt natural. The living room, which had once staged a humiliating baby shower, was filled with laughter and warmth. During a lull in the festivities, Adrian slipped away to the foyer. He stood by the window, gazing at the Charles River. The sun's reflection danced on the water. In his mind, he replayed the year's tumult, the cruelty he had shown Marina, the harsh words, the affair with Colette, the moment he first touched Liliana's tiny hand in the NICU. A rush of gratitude and regret welled within him. Marina found him there, quietly pensive. "Everything okay?" she asked. He turned, a tender light in his eyes. "I was just thinking how much I almost lost." She approached, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You're here now, Adrian. We're here." He drew her into a gentle embrace, mindful of the distance they had traveled to reclaim this shared moment. In the background, Liliana's babbling carried from the living room, accompanied by the soft hum of contented voices. That evening, once the guests departed and Liliana was tucked into bed, Adrian surprised Marina with a small box. Inside lay a locket engraved with Liliana's initials. Marina's eyes shone with tears. "It's beautiful," she said, opening it to find a tiny photo of Liliana already placed inside. "I wanted something to symbolize how far we've come," he said simply. Marina leaned in, allowing him to clasp the locket around her neck. For the first time since Liliana's birth, she felt a tender spark for Adrian, an ember of love that had been battered but not extinguished. As Liliana entered toddlerhood, Marina began to revive her old passions with renewed vigor. She collaborated with the Literacy Center to create specialized programs for mothers and young children, drawing on her own experiences. Adrian supported her endeavors, occasionally speaking at fundraisers to leverage the Caldwell name for good. Professionally, Adrian restructured Caldwell Innovations. He delegated more responsibilities to his executive team, enabling him to maintain a healthier work-life balance. At first, investors expressed anxiety, but the firm held steady. New acquisitions proceeded smoothly, and Adrian's second-in-command, a sharp but empathetic coup, handled daily operations with finesse. Marina and Adrian continued therapy, no longer in crisis mode but committed to nurturing a healthier partnership. They addressed lingering issues of trust, jealousy, and control. The arguments they did have were more constructive, grounded in mutual respect rather than derision. In a bold move, Adrian proposed a philanthropic wing within Caldwell Innovations. They announced the Caldwell Family Initiative for Women and Children's Health, partnering with Massachusetts General Hospital to support neonatal care. When they made the formal announcement, accompanied by a modest press conference, Marina stood by Adrian's side, Liliana perched in her arms. For once, the Caldwell name was attached to compassion rather than scandal, a step that felt profoundly right. Years passed, and Liliana blossomed into a lively child with inquisitive brown eyes. One day she came home from preschool with an assignment to create a family tree. Adrian helped her draw it, carefully writing the names of grandparents and even including some of the Caldwell ancestors whose paintings still adorned the mansion's walls. As they worked, Liliana asked innocent questions about her parents' childhoods, her grandparents' lives, and how she came into the world. Marina listened from the kitchen, heart swelling. So much had changed since that fraught period when Liliana's life hung in the balance. Adrian no longer radiated the same hard-edged arrogance. He smiled more, especially around Liliana, who worshipped him in the unguarded way only children do. But perhaps the greatest shift resided in Marina herself. She had grown more assertive, more confident in her role as a mother and partner. Gone was the timid woman who tiptoed around Adrian's moods. In her place stood someone who recognized her own worth and expected Adrian to recognize it as well. One crisp spring afternoon, the three of them walked along the Charles River Esplanade, a route that had once been part of Adrian's solitary runs. Liliana insisted on feeding the ducks, squealing when they swarmed around for breadcrumbs. Marina and Adrian lagged behind, watching their daughter in quiet wonder. "She's fearless," Marina noted, smiling. Adrian nodded, a glint of pride in his eyes. "And she's changed my life in ways I never imagined." Marina slipped her hand into Adrian's. "Mine too." They stood there for a while, letting the gentle breeze carry away any lingering ghosts. The bright sun shimmered on the water, and for the first time in a long time, the future looked promising, free from the shadows of betrayal and regret. Every hardship carries within it a seed of transformation. Adrian's arrogance nearly destroyed his marriage, his family, and the empathy he once buried beneath ambition. Only by confronting his faults, by setting aside his pride and embracing honesty, did he salvage the bonds he almost let slip away. Marina's quiet resolve and unwavering love became the anchor that guided them both toward growth and second chances. And Liliana, the fragile child he once considered a hindrance, turned into the brightest light in his life. If this story touched your heart, please show your support by liking, sharing, and subscribing. Your engagement helps more people discover stories of hope, healing, and the power of redemption. Together, we can remind the world that it's never too late to confront our mistakes, to fight for the people we love, and to discover the deeper meaning that lies beyond wealth and prestige. Let's keep the conversation of growth and resilience alive.